Hello, everyone. I'll give it just a moment as we get everyone in the room. Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Sarah McDonald. I'm a coordinator of knowledge translation and programs with Parachute, and we're pleased to welcome you to the Public Health Response in Alberta, leveraging the Poison and Drug Information Service and National Toxicovigilance Network's webinar, presented by the Poison and Drug Information Service, Toxicovigilance Canada, and Parachute. Today, we will hear from the Poison and Drug Information Service, also known as PADIS, Toxicovigilance Canada, followed by two working groups of Toxicovigilance Canada, which would be the Poison Outreach and Communications Working Group and the Toxicology Laboratory Response Network. After the presentations, there will be an opportunity for a Q&A. And at the end of the webinar, there will be a roundtable opportunity. We welcome you to join the roundtable discussion by sharing what roles and responsibilities you have in detecting and managing toxic exposures in Alberta. Some housekeeping before we get started today. We welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat to let others know who's here today and who they may hear from during the roundtable. Please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A box at any time during the webinar, and they'll be addressed during the Q&A portion. During the roundtable, if you'd like to contribute, please indicate that you'd like to speak by using the raise hand icon on your Zoom window, and we will welcome you to unmute yourself. We will please note that the webinar will be recorded and distributed out to registrants via email afterwards. And when you're leaving, you will be prompted to complete a short evaluation. Please do take the time to do that evaluation for us on your way out. It really helps us understand the efficacy of these types of learning opportunities and where we can improve. Before we get going on the presentations, I'd like to acknowledge the land today. We acknowledge the traditional lands and territories of the Indigenous peoples who've lived on these lands and have taken care of them since time immemorial. What became known as the province of Alberta in 1905 is also the traditional and ancestral home to many Indigenous peoples, and for that we are honored to have shared this land with them since Treaties 6, 7, and 8 were entered into. Alberta is also the historical Northwest Métis homeland, which includes 5 territories. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today, and those who have gone before us. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. I will now pass over to Claude Bouchard for opening remarks. Claude is the Division Chief of the Chemical Emergency Management and Toxicovigilance Division of Health Canada. Claude, over to you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the people joining us in person and those participating virtually. We are pleased to be hosting this session together with the colleagues from the Poison and Drug Information Service, Alberta Health Services, and Parachute. We're absolutely thrilled to have participants from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Northwest Territories. I want to thank Parachute for taking care of the logistics for this event. Today's discussions should highlight the fact that toxicovigilance is a shared responsibility. We are stronger when we work together across jurisdictions. Whether we are dealing with emerging chemical threat, evolving patterns of substance use, product safety issues, or deliberate or accidental contamination events, protecting the public requires timely detection, trusted information sharing, and coordinated action. Toxicovigilance Canada was built on this principle. It is an horizontal network of equal partners spanning poison centers, public health, regulators, toxicology laboratories, health security, clinicians, and other sectors across the country. The goal is to enhance real-time situational awareness and to make sure partners can rely on one another for reach-back expertise, rapid notifications, and share evidence to support timely action. Our purpose today is to continue building these connections with provincial and territorial partners and to ensure that you are invited to be part of this network. We want to work with you and for this network to reflect the priorities and needs across disciplines and jurisdictions. By collaborating, we can better prevent and reduce harm from toxic exposures and ultimately protect the health of the people we serve. Thank you again for being here. We look forward to the conversation and to strengthening this partnership together. So now I'm inviting Ms. Brooke Bodden, who will give you a presentation on PADIS. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Claude. I'd like to introduce Brooke Button from the Poison and Drug Information Service. And Brooke is a clinical information resource specialist too with PADIS. Over to you, Brooke.
Thank you. So I just wanted to start with giving just my background as a registered nurse and clinician here. And I'm, honored to be presenting here, but this is basically my reward for 20 years of service at PADIS. So to give an overview, an introduction, it's really for people who may not be as familiar with our service, who might be listening in or have had much dealing with day-to-day poison center work. So the Poison Center has been providing, information and management on poisonings to the public and healthcare professionals since 1986. We provide 24/7 expert toxicology care across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the Northwest Territories, serving a population of over 6 million. The team here supports healthcare professionals and public through a high-volume call center, addressing a wide range of exposures. So it could be anything from pharmaceuticals to household products, environmental hazards, and so on. The list is very long. And PADIS conducts clinical education as well for medical residents here. And we have a couple of specialized services that I'll dip into later regarding our fellowship program and the MedTox. So I just want to invite everyone to scan the code that they can see on the screen here, which is a poll. And in the room, I have some copies. So if everyone's able to just participate, I would really appreciate it. While you're getting those loaded there, I'll run through the question. So which substance had the highest number of cases at PADIS in the last year? Hopefully that didn't give away too many clues when you were chatting earlier. So the options are sertraline, which is an antidepressant with the trade name Zoloft, quetiapine, an antipsychotic with the trade name Seroquel, acetaminophen, of course, is Tylenol, and fentanyl, being a street drug, does not have a brand name. So while you're responding to that poll there, I am just going to move into some information about our service area here. So although the service started in 1986, it was just Alberta when it began. And in 2001, the service expanded to bring in Saskatchewan. And in 2011, we became the provider of service to the Northwest Territories. So that is our happy family now, the 3 regions. Okay, so a little review of who we are. If we look at these roles in leadership, we have our medical director, Dr. Jackie Heog, associate medical director, Dr. Riley Hartman. And then on the operational side, of course, we have Director Randall Blanton and clinical manager Todd. In terms of our staff here, we are about 34 individuals. So clinical information resource specialists, CIRS, level 1s are people who answer the phones, and they're a mix of RNs and pharmacists. Level 2s or CIRS 2s, also known as clinician. We have Amin Rajwani, Kyle Barton, and myself providing that clinical staff support. In terms of the medical team, we have 9 on-call medical toxicologists. So 8 are based in Alberta and 1 is in Saskatchewan. And our clinical pharmacology and toxicology fellowship program did graduate 2 medical toxicologists this year. I think Lance mentioned earlier that we do have 1 individual at present, and then we have another 2 coming in the next round. So it's a very successful program for us. And here's a look at some of our awesome toxicologists. I didn't put in photos of all the staff, but we did have this slide prepared from another talk. It's actually made up of quite a few of the CPT toxicology fellowship graduates. It's really exciting for us. Okay, so just a few comments on our specialty services at CPT. Calgary is home to the first CPT subspecialty residency in Western Canada, although there are 4 across Canada in total, and it's accredited by the Royal College, and this 2-year fellowship program launched in 2018. So part of it is it also provides the on-call consult service within hospitals across Alberta. So they can be contacted directly by bedside staff for that service. And a nice sort of side effect for us is that we get these regular toxicology bulletins on topics to do with drugs. So it's known as the CPT Pearl of the Week. And I just have an example up here. There is a significant library of these that's available. So that can be found on the University of Calgary School of Medicine site. And so they'll typically be set up like this, where there's some information about the drug or toxin, and there'll be some kinetic information, management info, just general information on toxicity, and there's a lot of information contained within these. So it's very useful for us as information specialists answering the phone that we can draw on this information as we need. And we can also send these to the bedside, or they can access it themselves from the university website. The second program I just want to highlight here is with patients being seen in our MedTox clinic. So there's no information specialist involved in that service, but our toxicologists here do rotate through that service, and we can refer patients there via their physician. So that is an important thing to note. It says a physician referral only. So it does operate once a month, and the clinic follows a very wide range of patients, again, as with all things toxicology. So there's a list there of some of the focus areas, but we might be following the long-term neurological effects of a carbon monoxide exposure. We could be following heavy metal testing over months. And sometimes patients will bring in their test results that they've received elsewhere, and they're looking for some interpretation, management advice. Okay, so just a peek at our call volumes here. So we did have higher call numbers there in 2020, just looking back at the past 5 years. I think most poison centers at that time saw a bump in calls due to COVID, whether that was from patients sort of inappropriately trying to treat themselves and sort of running into problems there with some toxicity, or perhaps we definitely saw that increased use of cleaners and sanitization products, and so a lot more exposures were happening, of course, with that. Then in mid-2021, the other thing that dropped our numbers down there was the closure of our medication and herbal advice line, which was run just for the public. And it would tackle non-urgent questions like drug interactions, or somebody wants to take a herbal product and they're concerned that might interact with their prescription meds, so we would take a look at that. We'd answer questions about medication use in pregnancy and lactation, so that kind of thing, but we just weren't able to continue to support that line. So we're now sort of stabilizing in our call numbers there. With that sort of daily average calls coming in of 146, 147, and 2025 is looking to be on track for some numbers there. Okay, so it's time to go back to the poll. So I'm just going to have to exit here to pull up the results.
The stop share. Stop share. Hit the red stop share.
Okay, yeah, I'm doing some help here.
Yes, Sarah.
Okay, so yeah, just on the edge.
And you have to reshare that window, Sarah.
And then we can just hit results. Yeah, sure. Perfect. Okay, thanks for the help with that. Okay, so I'm seeing that there's some very well educated people in the in the room and online, because yes, acetaminophen is the #1. So we will go through those results here. I just want to see if I think it actually looks really cool in the. Yeah, there we go. So you can sort of see in the bar graph there. So no one chose quetiapine antipsychotic. That is very interesting. So can you help me get back to the slides? Should be sharing again. Okay, thanks everyone for your patience with that. I wasn't able to embed the results to pop up in the slide. It would have been a really cool feature. But yes, so the results are in. Our top 5 substances at PADIS is #1 acetaminophen, and that's incorporating, you know, all different formulations of acetaminophen. The second one here is the atypical antipsychotics. So quetiapine, which I made the comment, oh, it's interesting no one picked that. I was hoping someone would, because they would have come in second place there. And then #3 and #5, so ethanol and benzodiazepines. And benzodiazepines are drugs like Xanax and Ativan, are a couple of brand names there. They often don't come into us as a call about a single thing, like a single ingestion of alcohol or a single benzodiazepine. It's usually as part of a polysubstance overdose. They're very commonly incorporated in those types of calls. And ibuprofen is at #4. So again, that's sort of easy to grab over-the-counter product. And then I just want to include a little bit specific to pediatrics under the age of 13. So again, acetaminophen is #1. And then the others in the list there, the ibuprofen, melatonin, vitamin D, very common over-the-counter meds or supplements for children to be around, to be given, and they often come in the gummy or chewable formation, which makes them highly desirable. And then foreign bodies really encompasses an extremely large group of products. So it could be a crayon, it could be the oxygen absorber silica gel packet that comes in your purse or your shoebox. Very easy for for kids to get into, but not intended to be swallowed. So that's why we get the calls here. All right, so I just want to take a minute to talk about the toxicovigilance partnership that we have. I realize that this will be covered in the rest of the workshop, so I'm just touching on sort of one or two instances here. So in terms of emerging product safety concerns and product surveillance, the poison centres, do have a role in highlighting concerns. The BC Poison Centre, otherwise known as DPIC, identified cases of eye injuries from micellar water, and that was sometimes when people were confusing the bottle with their contact lens solution. So it was causing a lot of irritation and trauma to the eye there. So other poison centres contributed data from our databases in terms of these exposures, and it did result in a letter to the Cosmetic Alliance of Canada, just to highlight the risks around the product and what we were seeing here at the poison centres, and then to suggest some strategies to mitigate, like around labelling and maybe education and so forth. So another area where poison centres can be really integral is detecting these new formulations that are coming on the market all the time. And then we start to hear about them in calls, and of course then they come up on your radar. So it's really important that we stay coordinated in our response to these exposures so that we can aggregate this data from each poison centre and have a team to help us sort of navigate the process of getting the information out. So obviously new formulations can have all sorts of new risks, and sometimes the packaging is a big issue. So I just happened to come across this product. We didn't get a call on it, but I did find it online. It's a pain relief cream that has these fun little rollerball applicators. And so it feels nice and soothing on the skin. You can sort of think, oh yeah, to a child, then they would start to lick it, like guaranteed. But it does contain lidocaine, which is a local anesthetic, and menthol. So those are two ingredients that we are on high alert for in terms of toxicity. But as I said, no calls on that one yet, and it's highlighted as a new product, so it could be coming our way. Just another few quick examples here, and these are the products that have, the fun flavors like the watermelon and the peach and all that type of thing. So with nicotine and caffeine pouches, nicotine pouches have been around for, I think, 2 years now. And then there was some restrictions that came in around the flavoring profile of these to make them less attractive to children. But in terms of caffeine pouches that we're starting to hear about, these are available online, so they haven't been authorized yet, and yet, people can still acquire them, of course. Now, some of the caffeine pouches I found online have up to 225 milligrams of caffeine in each little pouch, which is about the equivalent of a, large energy drink. So it wouldn't take very many of those to be quite toxic for a child. Yeah, I'm trying to think if we've had any, I don't think we've had any calls about the caffeine pouches yet. It is very hard in our system to try and find that information. You have to look it up as a powder formulation, and then that brings up all those pre-workout drinks that have caffeine powder in. So it's a little tricky for us to trace these. So that may be where the substance verbatim information starts to come into play with how we're naming these. And then I just wanted to touch on the flavored acetaminophen powders. Again, these have been available for a little while, and we've had less than 10 calls, I would say, since these came on the market a couple of years ago. But in theory, I thought we would have heard about them more because, of course, they're fun flavors. They're, designed for children. They, I thought, oh, they're probably easily opened. but apparently they're not, because one of the callers, who was the parent, had let us know, like, oh, they're actually quite hard to tear, but you can cut them with scissors. And in fact, that's what her 6-year-old had done, had gone and cut them all off with scissors and then was happily eating those. So yes, so I mean, they obviously can pose a significant risk and they taste good. Yeah, I think that was all I wanted to say about that. Essentially, yeah, just thank you for your participation in the poll and your attention today. And for any follow-up questions, my email's on the slide. But I'm happy if there's a question now or.
That's it. We'll do Q&A.
We'll do it at the end. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I would like to now introduce our representatives from Toxicovigilance Canada. So first, we're going to have Richard Wooten, team leader of the Surveillance and Analytics section of the Chemical Emergency Management and Toxicovigilance Division of Health Canada, followed by Julie Bureau, team leader of the Preparedness, Planning and Outreach section of the Chemical Emergency Management and Toxicovigilance Division of Health Canada. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Still on this? Thank you very much for having me today and giving us an opportunity to connect. Really, our objectives for today is to share, to learn, to collaborate. We want to share our story, our experience developing the Canadian surveillance system for poison information, the development of the Toxicovigilance Canada network. We want to learn from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Northwest Territories partners. We want to promote pan-Canadian toxicovigilance awareness, collaboration, and partnership. So a little bit about our division. Essentially, we have 3 sections. You've already met our division manager, Claude Bouchard. And essentially, we are the health portfolio focal point for chemical emergency management and toxicovigilance. And basically, when we look at the sort of 3 sections within our division, we have the science and operations section. You'll hear from Mark in a little bit. That leads the 24/7 Emergency Preparedness and Response Duty Officer Program, the Toxicology Laboratory Response Network, and many sort of science-based activities within our division. And Julie Bureau with the Preparedness Planning and Outreach, leading a lot of the policy work, supporting the science and operations section, surveillance analytics section with planning support, as well as sort of more specific emergency management planning, and leading our outreach efforts for the 1844 Poison X number, which is designed to connect Canadians to poison centers. The team that I lead, the surveillance and analytics section, works very, very closely with Canadian poison centers and PT partners. And our goal is really to aggregate, analyze, and interpret pan-Canadian poison center data. And to make that happen, we're very privileged to actually be embedding epidemiologists within the 5 poison centers across Canada. So it really is a horizontal collaborative initiative that we're looking to work across disciplines and jurisdictions in our shared interest in protecting and maintaining the health of Canadians. Beyond our sort of toxicovigilance pieces, I've spoken about the sort of the 24/7 surveillance and monitoring, the chemical emergency management aspects. But on the screen, you're seeing sort of like a sort of a diagram of sort of the federal health portfolio, key parts sort of highlighted. But I think one of the really interesting aspects of where we're situated is we're well placed to coordinate across the disciplines and jurisdictions and to make those linkages into the federal health portfolio. So, for example, I would challenge Brooke. You have a essential oil. Who do you need to connect with? And of course, that seems like an easy question, but it's not, because did they make a health claim? And if they made a health claim, that's National Non-Prescription Product Safety Directorate. If they didn't, it's Consumer and Hazardous Product Safety Directorate. And we try to sort of be that navigator to sort of connecting the partners so that we can all work together in our shared interests. So when we look at that work, we coordinate across, I think, over 25 health portfolio program areas, from consumer products to pesticides to marketed pharmaceuticals to natural health products, to the National Emergency Strategic Stockpile, to laboratory analysis, sort of a broad range of areas that support could be provided from the federal health portfolio. So next slide here, sort of why collaborate on toxicovigilance and prevention of poisonings. And I think it's really important to highlight that, sort of globally, the increasing dependence on chemicals requires the health sector to expand on its traditional roles and responsibilities to be able to address the public health and medical issues associated with the use of chemicals and their effects. In Canada, twice as many people die from unintentional poisonings than from transportation-related injuries. And then if we look at the intentional exposures, Canadian poison centers are reporting roughly 40,000 self-harm cases a year. By stratifying pan-Canadian poison center data by age, reason, product category, you can essentially identify priority areas for means restrictions, which is included in the World Health Organization Live Life Implementation Guide for Suicide Prevention, which essentially says limiting access to means of suicide has repeatedly been proven across multiple settings to markedly reduce suicide rates. It is also now endorsed by the World Health Organization as an evidence-based, cost-effective intervention for suicide prevention. Domestic and international toxicovigilance networks can enhance our collective public health, regulatory, mental health, health security, and general poison prevention, treatment, and harm reduction capabilities to protect our citizens from both unintentional and intentional poisonings. Our poison centers are keystones to these networks, as they have the real-world evidence on poisonings and expertise to support toxicovigilance disciplines and jurisdictions in the detection and management of toxic exposures. We must never forget that poisonings are a preventable experience, and by working together, we can save a lot of lives. This slide sort of shows, sort of the 5 poison centers across Canada. So we have the Atlantic Canada Poison Center, we have the Quebec Poison Center situated in Ontario that provides services to Ontario, Manitoba, and Nunavut, and of course Pattis, who you've just heard from, and then the Drug and Poison Information Service in BC. And Brooke sort of covered off, sort of all of the aspects of sort of the Poison Center, but I think it's really important to highlight that, these centers are available 24/7. They manage 2/3 of the calls from the public remotely, which generates incredible savings in the healthcare system, as they're able to keep these patients safely at home. And they're staffed with medical toxicologists, registered nurses, and pharmacists that are certified as specialists in poison information. And it's also sort of interesting to note that almost all of the exposures reported to poison centers are regulated by Health Canada. And by working together, we can, sort of identify those priorities. What do poison centers get calls about? Pesticides, consumer products, controlled substances, foodborne illness, environmental exposures, occupational exposures, agents of concern from a self-harm perspective, or sort of from criminal acts or terrorism potentially, which of course is something that we are very concerned about. A little bit now then on sort of the sort of history of conducting surveillance of poison center data. And I'm going to go back to 1965, but I won't go into a whole lot of detail and drag you through it for a long period, but it is quite fascinating. On the screen, you see one of my mentors, Dr. Ed Napke. He was the medical officer in charge of the poison control program from 1965 until 1989. And essentially that picture depicts the pigeonhole system where he would file products and exposures from over 400 hospitals that were reporting, sort of data to him at the time. And from this work, he became one of the founding members of the World Health Organization program for international drug monitoring. Sadly, in the 1980s, a voluntary program in a regulatory environment was, one of the first to be cut. We went into the dark ages of, sort of knowing what was being collected by these poison centers, which generated the real world evidence on poisonings. In 2000, there was an attempt to sort of reestablish poison center surveillance. This was before my time, but my understanding is that it was sort of a Health Canada-led initiative that didn't properly engage across the disciplines and jurisdictions to work through the complexity. And sadly, that effort wasn't successful. And then now what we'll talk about is sort of from 2013 onwards, our efforts to build the Canadian Surveillance System for Poison Information and Toxicovigilance Canada. But I will just quickly share some words from my mentor, Dr. Ed Napke. And he said, the hopes for the future. The future is real but hazy. I'd like to see three things. The principal centers be keystones to any chemical emergency, be it personal, local, or at the national level. That these centers also become part of the drug adverse reaction information and post-market surveillance system. And three, that there be proper funding and staffing. And now I'm going to sort of tell a bit of a personal story as to how I got involved with poison centers and this work. Before I came to Health Canada, I was with Public Safety, where I had become the course director of the federal chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive first responder training program. And from my work at Public Safety and with the partners, when I came across to Health Canada, I got invited to partake in a Code Orange simulation at the McGill campus hospital. And this was my first, sort of meeting with the medical toxicology community. Around the same time, our department, the Public Health Agency of Canada and Health Canada, got pulled in to support a town hall where, some people that were with a Canadian mission had been exposed to a white powder substance. And essentially, Health Canada provided scientific support to medical professionals at the Public Health Agency of Canada. And, that was, sort of the support that was provided to Global Affairs and the partners to answer questions. And it really sort of brought up this question, why aren't we better connected with the Canadian poison centers? So from the connections we've made with the Code Orange training, we'd reached out to the Canadian Association of Poison Centers and Clinical Toxicologists. And I won't forget the first conversation that I had with Dr. Martin de Liberté, who was the president at the time. And basically what he said is, we are so busy pulling drowning people from the river, we have no time to look upstream to see who was pushing them in. And meanwhile, the Pest Management Regulatory Agency had conducted an assessment that indicated that poison centers had 5 times more data than every other source of reporting that was available to them. The Marketed Health Products Directorate had conducted a pilot in 2009, and data from one poison center would have doubled the amount, taking the phone call, doubled the amount of adverse reaction data available to support risk assessment on energy drinks. And then in 2012, I think most of you will remember detergent pods. So on the screen, you can see detergent pods have poison control world on edge. And essentially what happened is, at the time, there really wasn't much connection between the Consumer and Hazardous Product Safety Directorate and the Canadian poison centers. So there was a connection made with the president of the CAPCCT, and essentially he called each of the 5 poison centers, and with the help of an Excel spreadsheet, put together sort of a total call counts associated with the detergent packets. And this became the basis of the first public advisory on detergent packets in Canada. Concurrently to sort of these health security linkages and sort of regulatory linkages, the public health community and the injury prevention centers were also taking notice. And you'll see on the sort of the right-hand side, sort of the white paper on poison prevention, which I believe was authored by Parachute in collaboration with the Alberta Injury Prevention Center. So both will be speaking here shortly. So I'll make sure that I have my words accurate. And sort of the next part here is after those observations, how do we move this grassroots dream into a pan-Canadian government priority? In November of 2013, our team led a hospital readiness for hazardous materials and chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive events workshop, which was for the first time included poison centers. One of the recommendations that came out from this event was that from a health security perspective, Canada needed a pan-Canadian poison center surveillance system. That statement's probably never been more true than it is today. Those linkages with national security and early detection are of particular interest and concern to many. Fast forward to December 19th, 2013, so we're pretty close to the holiday period, and our team thought it'd be a great idea to coordinate a meeting across the federal health portfolio and send it out to 20 programs and said, hey, we'd like to meet. We want to have a discussion about this idea of building a pan-Canadian poison center surveillance system. All 20 programs showed up, and that close to the holidays, we knew we had something pretty substantial. And there was an incredible amount of support from the health portfolio programs. And shortly thereafter, we engaged the CAPCCT, who agreed to co-chair a task force, a horizontal initiative of equal partners to explore options and feasibility of aggregating, analyzing, interpreting pan-Canadian poison center data. That task force, I think, had 64 stakeholder groups from injury prevention centers, academia, the poison centers, of course, provincial and territorial counterparts. And lastly, we completed a Canadian Institutes of Health Research Best Brains Exchange to bring together senior decision makers, researchers, poison center specialists, and international partners with relevant expertise to share. Our senior medical advisor to the Deputy Minister summarized the day absolutely perfectly. It is not a matter if we should build a C-SPY, but rather how. The link to the CIHR Best Brains Exchange is on the slide if you're interested in it. I think it's a very powerful tool to help advance initiatives from grassroots to sort of government priorities. And as stated in sort of the previous slide, this idea of building a Canadian surveillance system for poison information, sort of business case was, sort of came out of that Best Brains Exchange. Health Canada was identified as best suited to lead the horizontal analysis. And that work really started in 2014. The first step was interviewing the 64 stakeholder groups. And from those discussions, we developed an outcomes map, which was really interesting when you interview 64 stakeholder groups and you hear a constant message. We want, timely data, we need quality trend data, and equally important to those first two things is a community of practice that can take action. So it's not enough to generate timely data, to have quality data. We need to make the linkages with those that can actually use it and support them in the process. And when we think about the complexity of many of the files that we try to move forward, we're much stronger when we do it together. Then we collectively developed option evaluation criteria. We identified options. We conducted the analysis. We agreed on the preferred option. And in 2014, we established a poison center community of practice. And initially, it was poison centers and our team working on the business analysis. But over time, it grew. We got requests coming in from regulatory partners, from public health partners. We had law enforcement saying, hey, I'd like to be part of this group because, we've got this, clandestine lab that we're going into, and we'd like to be able to reach back to expertise, provide guidance. We had medical examiners who equally have some very important data when it comes to toxicovigilance. And the group grew and grew and grew. In 2015, we uploaded 100,000 poison center records to the Canadian Network for Public Health Intelligence. And we developed the first iteration of the C-SPY data dictionary, which were the core data elements that we were interested in from surveillance purposes. And 2016, the business case was approved by sort of all partners, provincial, territorial, poison centers, and injury prevention partners that had contributed. And then in 2017, we conducted a significant amount of sort of analysis within Health Canada, leveraging sort of a director general level steering committee that assisted in bringing this to the highest levels within the department. identifying, where this initiative should fit. And by 2018, the Deputy Minister of Health Canada basically agreed to fund and that CSPI should be co-led by Health Canada in collaboration with our poison centers and provincial and territorial counterparts. In that same year, the Poison Center Community of Practice was rebranded to Toxicovigilance Canada to reflect the multi-sectoral membership that it sort of was comprised of. And I should highlight here, this slide doesn't talk about sort of the development of other concurrent activities. For example, the Toxicology Laboratory Response Network was developing in this time period as well. And through that work, we had also sort of the pan-Canadian clinical and forensic laboratories and connections with the medical examiners and coroners. So Poison Center, data aggregated through CSPI, it really is now providing a critical source for real-world data that supports early detection of health risks, informs activities such as evidence-based decision-making, risk management, public advisories, supporting outbreak investigation, industry engagement, and Brooke sort of provided an example of sort of engaging industry associations, regulatory work, compliance and enforcement. And much of this work has been done manually. This has been see something, say something, raising the flag, hey, I'm seeing this, and manual data requests. And what's getting exciting is we're moving towards having an implemented system where data is automated upload to our surveillance system. And this slide, I just want to sort of share sort of our structure. So it really is a horizontal governance structure, sort of horizontality of provincial, territorial, federal programs, the poison centers. And we have a number of working groups. So we have one that's, sort of leading the data governance aspect that, sort of led, sort of information sharing agreements and similar type work. We have a surveillance working group, which has a subgroup working on, sort of the, sort of signals protocol and how we manage signal detection, assessment and reporting. And we have, groups that are dedicated to data quality and comparability, training, and knowledge exchange. And in this diagram, you see the public outreach and communications working group. It's sort of shown under the CSPI sort of horizontal governance, but that's kind of a lie. It really is a standalone component of Toxicovigilance Canada, but there's such a critical linkage between the poison center partners that work in CSPI and the injury prevention centers. And I'm not going to speak too much further because Patty and Steph will speak about that shortly. And sort of, a little bit of, how this works. Basically, we have a number of agreements. Roughly 50% of the funding that comes to our program is going right out the door to directly support Poison Center's Parachute with, sort of the work that they do to support, sort of the service delivery aspects. So essentially, with the Poison Centers, Health Canada has, sort of MOAs, contracts for sort of providing some resources to support the surveillance activities, data quality, training, managing data requests, and providing sort of expertise to support initiatives. We have information sharing agreements, which have now all been signed. And that was a major effort, and I should thank Boanna, who's here in the room with me, and the multitude of partners from the poison centers and sort of privacy management and legal. It is no small feat to achieve sort of these agreements at the pan-Canadian level. And then we also have the epidemiologist placement agreements that enables us to embed epidemiologists into provincial territorial poison centers and hospital corporations in some cases. And I think this is really quite critical because the epidemiologists can provide epidemiology support, but they're working hand in hand with the clinicians to really understand the data and to work together as to how that should be presented. We also have, sort of a multi-year agreement with Parachute, Canada's national charity dedicated to injury prevention, and this contract supports knowledge translation, outreach, coordinating stakeholder meetings, the Toxicovigilance Canada webinar series, supporting the CAPCCT website, and coordinating, Pan-Canadian Poison Center annual report development, the Poison Prevention Week coordination, and I should stop because I'll forget things. If I make it look exhaustive, it won't be. There's a major amount of collaboration and support in that piece. And then the last item is on the, sort of the hosting of the Canadian Surveillance System for Poison Information Application on the Canadian Network for Public Health Intelligence. But it's not just the C-SPI surveillance application, Toxicovigilance Canada, Toxicology Laboratory Response Network, and other components of our work is also housed on the Canadian Network for Public Health Intelligence. And I think over time, there's an amazing opportunity there, recognizing, for example, the SIMFI alerts modules and how chief medical officers of health and other critical partners are already sort of using the SIMFI platform for, I think it was roughly about 100 surveillance applications that are active on it. So it made a lot of sense and why the business analysis ended where it did. This sort of slide sort of depicts, what we've been doing from 2018 to 2025. A saying that I use a lot, it's a bit like building a plane and flying it at the same time, but it's incredible, the partnerships and collaboration that have made this possible. A lot of the activities that we're working on together, data quality and comparability, training, both Poison Center staff and data users, surveillance system development, managing complex agreements on privacy and information sharing, collaborating on surveillance and reporting, enabling subject matter, sort of reach back and processing a large volume of data requests, and then sort of the general program administration and sort of fostering this concept of a Toxicovigilance Canada initiative. So some of the key, sort of a couple of key successes, we started publishing Pan-Canadian Poison Center annual reports, and the hyperlinks on the slide is there if you're interested to see those reports. We have launched together 1844 Poison X, which is a number for Canadians to reach poison centers sort of across Canada. Previous to this work, there were 9 different numbers for Canadians to use to access poison centers. And an Ipsos survey, I believe it was around 2020, I think identified that only roughly about 40% of Canadian parents knew of or how to access their poison center, which obviously we wanted to improve together. Also sort of important to point out that poison center data is now included as part of the suicide surveillance indicator framework, sort of critical information there being provided to support work in that space. Of course, the sort of the launch of the C-SPI application, we have now over 1.7 million records that have been uploaded to the C-SPI application on SIMFI from the Ontario Poison Center going back to 1997. The quality assurance, quality control work on that is very close to completion. And those same scripts will then be used for the automated upload of the Drug and Poison Information Service and the Atlantic Canada Poison Service before coming back to PADIS, who has been actually sending data since 2016 for development purposes to the C-SPI application to just sort of align it with some of the new processes. So essentially, we should be in a position to launch the surveillance application, I would say, in 2026, which is, I think, very exciting for all of us that have invested so much time in this. So now I want to move beyond poison centers, because poison centers, I really do believe, are keystones of toxicovigilance. But toxicovigilance is a collaborative effort across many disciplines and jurisdictions. And it's all about detection and management of toxic exposures of public health concern. And to do this effectively, we have to work across disciplines and jurisdictions. We support one another, we share information. There's information provided on this slide. We were privileged to be able to work with the World Health Organization on the guidelines for establishing a poison center. And if you do have an opportunity, Chapter 5 of the guidelines for establishing a poison center is on toxicovigilance and prevention of poisonings. with one of the recommendations being highlighted on the slide, which is, health ministries and public health agencies should support toxicovigilance and poison prevention activities in the form of advocacy, facilitation, endorsement, and funding. So, why we got to participate in sort of this, sort of global work on, sort of the WHO guidelines, because of work that had been done domestically in building this Toxicovigilance Canada network. And due to the multitude of disciplines and jurisdictions involved in detection and management of toxic exposures, this network of networks was really established to, for effective communication and collaboration. The network now has over 450 members spanning poison centers, tox labs, NGOs, medical examiners, regulators, public health, mental health, occupational health, environmental health, public safety. I can keep going here. Health security, from federal, provincial, territorial organizations. And some of the core components include the poison center surveillance work under CSPI, the toxicology laboratory response network, an antidote registry tool, which is being used by a number of jurisdictions across Canada for antidote registry management, and the public outreach and communications working group, which you'll hear a bit more about shortly. And as I said, this is sort of all being hosted on the Canadian Network for Public Health Intelligence. And what's really interesting about that is, the Canadian Pediatric Society surveillance tool is also hosted on SynFi. The Canadian Hospital Injury Reporting Prevention program has, sort of their surveillance there, and a number of other relevant surveillance applications, which opens the door in the future once we've got CSPI up and active to sort of how do we create a more complete picture of poisonings spanning tox labs, poison centers, medical examiners, hospital data, etc. But I won't go too far down that rabbit hole today, because that is future work. What are the objectives of Toxicovigilance Canada? Very simple: partnership and collaboration, common situational awareness, early warning and notification, targeted health threat monitoring, and subject matter expertise and reach back. The next slide is going to sort of talk about some of the event-based signals that come through. But before I go there, maybe I'll just share a little bit on the last item. So subject matter expertise, reach back. This is something when you bring together a community that spans so many different disciplines and jurisdictions, if you have a problem, a question you can't answer, somebody else probably can. And sometimes that might not even be a Canadian. Going back to 2018, I was on call and we got a phone call from the Quebec Poison Center. They had a palytoxin exposure event. So palytoxin is a toxic coral. And the medical management aspect, they had that all well in hand. But what they were looking for was a remediation specialist to go into this home, which was a home daycare, and sort of do the remediation aspects. And local responders had cordoned off the street. They weren't allowing people into their homes. And I thought, well, this isn't going to be that difficult. We discussed it as a team. We called Canutech. We requested their assistance with, sort of accessing the, sort of the approved, sort of remediation specialist list. And what we discovered is there was nobody on that list that was willing to support remediation of palytoxin. So we were a little bit stumped domestically. We engaged partners that were part of our Toxicovigilance network. But fortunately, we're part of the Global Health Security Action Group, Chemical Event Working Group. At the time, the WHO had an Intox network, which was a network of all the poison centers around the world. And we engaged our international partners. And very quickly, we got information from Australia, from Hawaii, Public Health Scotland that had managed an event about a year previous. And we were able to bring that international information, share it with our domestic partners, and provide guidance to local responders that sort of were able to do the remediation. And because we had this network of networks of sort of people from different disciplines and jurisdictions, the regulatory program at Health Canada, after this was all said and done, said, hey, could you put us in contact with the local and provincial partners? We want to have a conversation about the regulations about the importation of coral. Is there perhaps something here we could do to enhance so that we can prevent such events in the future. So, that's sort of what this is all about, is, community working together in the interest of poison prevention, treatment, and harm reduction. This slide, sort of depicts a little bit of some of the things that have come across our desk through event-based surveillance. Could come through the poison centers, it could come through the tox labs, it could come through, sort of a member of Toxicovigilance Canada. But it's a very powerful tool to be able to raise your hand and say, see something, say something. I think back to COVID-19 related exposures to bleach, cleaners, sanitizers, non-authorized health treatments, and how we were able to quickly pull that information together to support public advisories, to support regulatory amendments, and all kinds of other things. So a really large thank you to the members of Toxicovigilance Canada that make this possible. You can see sort of a long list of things that are here. I'll highlight maybe a couple. Online procurement of non-authorized products. This is something that seems to be fairly common with some of the safety signals coming forward. When you purchase something online, there's no guarantee that it is what it says it is. And that has been tied to a number of poison center related signals that have come forward. We've had, sort of a number of cases associated with, sort of substance use, pediatric exposures to non-authorized, cannabis products. We've had cases associated with non-authorized online pharmacies selling opioids and all kinds of other things. So quite a bit there that comes across the desk. And, it does really help when you've got this network that we're able to work together on how we detect and manage these types of events. And my last slide, I just want to sort of talk a bit, where do poison centers and toxicovigilance expertise and data add value, and it really is across many areas, and this is just some select examples: clinical care, public health, regulatory, health security, and I think that's a big one, public safety and national security, research and academia, supporting efforts of our NGO and industry partners, mental distress and suicide prevention. But now what I'll be doing is sort of turning it over to my colleague, Julie Bureau, to sort of speak about the initial work and planning to develop a pan-Canadian toxicovigilance framework. And I think understanding the current shifting domestic and global environment, which is shaking everything up, the global supply chain, evolving threats, priorities such as national security, CBRNE readiness. I don't think toxicovigilance has ever been more important than it is right now. And we really do need to work together to ensure that we're properly connected to disciplines and jurisdictions that play such a critical role in prevention, mitigation, timely detection, and management of toxic exposures. So thank you very much. Julie, I will turn it over to you.
As while Julie gets set up, I'll just remind everyone about Julie's title. Julie is the team leader of the Preparedness, Planning and Outreach section of the Chemical Emergency Management and Toxicovigilance Division of Health Canada. Over to you, Julie.
Thanks, Sarah. As Richard just communicated, Toxicovigilance Canada is an evolving initiative that brings together diverse public health and poison control expertise to strengthen our collaborative response to toxic exposures. Our goal is to build mechanisms for collaborative assessments, ensuring that no partner or jurisdiction operates in isolation. We're also creating systems to better support timely detection and interventions as well when emerging toxicological issues arise, whether they're regional or national. In terms of support, it's equally important to establish strong connections between disciplines and jurisdictions so that we can share data, expertise, and best practices efficiently. To make this collaboration sustainable, we need a structured framework, one that clearly outlines shared policies, guiding principles, as well as coordination mechanisms. The goal of the Pan-Canadian Toxicovigilance Framework is to create a unified structure that supports our collective readiness across jurisdictions. By defining shared standards and improving coordination, we can act more cohesively during toxic exposure events, regardless of where they occur in Canada. The framework will guide how decisions are made by setting transparent criteria. This will help ensure that responses are not only rapid, but also consistent and equitable across Canada. Important to mention that this framework is also comprehensive, so it applies to toxic exposures resulting from both intentional and unintentional exposures, whether the impact is on a single individual or an entire population. In other words, it's really about creating a reliable, nationally coordinated system that can scale from individual cases to large-scale incidents. So, through discussions with stakeholders, we've made progress on defining what pan-Canadian toxicovigilance framework could look like, starting with some foundational scoping work. We're currently developing options that will inform the framework's mandate, overall purpose, and the key policy directions it should align with. An initial draft outline is being developed to capture the core components and the foundational principles, as this will serve as the structural blueprint for our coordinated national approach. Our draft objectives focus on building shared commitments across your jurisdictions, improving how we coordinate to ensure consistency and build capacity nationwide. We're also assessing what level of engagement will be needed from key partners. So that includes public health authorities, poison centers, and a variety of other stakeholders to ensure that the framework reflects real-world needs and perspectives. The scoping phase is setting the stage for a collaborative development process where input from across Canada will shape how the framework takes form. As part of our scoping and research work, we wanted to ensure that the Pan-Canadian Toxicovigilance Framework builds on proven models and aligns with established public health and emergency management principles. We examined several national and international frameworks and guiding documents. So we were looking for the lessons, structures, approaches that could be adapted to toxicovigilance in a Canadian context. One of the key frameworks we drew from is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. While it focuses on disaster management, many of its principles, such as coordination, preparedness, and risk communication, are relevant to toxicovigilance. By understanding what has worked in other systems, we can design a framework that's practical, coordinated, and resilient, and one that really fits our unique public health landscape. Based on our scoping work and the review of guiding frameworks like the Sendai model, we've developed a preliminary outline of what a Pan-Canadian Toxicovigilance framework could include. These components represent the foundation for a cohesive national framework, one that brings structure, clarity, and coordination in how we address toxicological events. So I'll touch a little bit on each element. When it comes to scope, the scope really defines what falls within the framework. So we're looking at types of exposures, level of response, and who's involved. Purpose will articulate why a framework exists to strengthen coordination, readiness, and response capacity nationwide. Governance establishes how the framework is overseen, managed, and connected across jurisdictions. Guiding principles sets the values and principles such as how we collaborate, transparency and equity, all of which underpin the actions that we undertake. Goals and targets defines what we aim to achieve both short and long term and how progress can be measured. The networks and systems maps out the partnerships, communication pathways, and information sharing systems that support implementation. Expected outcomes describes what success will look like, such as improved readiness, consistency, and the protection and maintenance of the health of people living in Canada. Priorities for action will identify key areas where early coordinated efforts can have the greatest impact. Now, these elements are still in draft form, but they provide a structured starting point for engagement and collaboration as we move forward to co-developing the full framework with partners. As we move forward, our immediate focus will shift to network mapping and partnership engagement. This is really the foundation for the collaborative framework development. The network mapping will really help us clarify and identify who's currently involved in toxicovigilance work across jurisdictions, where there are existing strengths and where we might need to identify and build new connections as well. Our goal is to work closely with our provincial and territorial partners to strengthen and formalize a pan-Canadian network of toxicovigilance partners, building on what we currently have. In terms of engagement, Toxicovigilance Canada and Health Canada will take the lead in engaging provincial and territorial partners, public health authorities, and ministries of health, while Health Canada will also connect with relevant federal health portfolio programs to ensure alignment. Once we've completed this mapping and engagement phase, we'll incorporate new partners into a dedicated toxicovigilance committee, which will guide the co-development of the pan-Canadian framework, ensuring that it reflects diverse perspectives and real-world operational needs. Having said all of this, the next phase is all about connection, bringing together the right people and the expertise to make the framework both practical as well as representative of Canada's diverse public health landscape. In summary, our work today has started laying out a strong foundation for consideration. We've scoped the needs, outlined the framework components, and identified our next steps for engagement and collaboration. Moving forward, we'll continue strengthening and mapping our toxicovigilance network across jurisdictions, so federal, provincial, and territorial, to ensure that broad participation and coordination is enabled. Another key step will be identifying and prioritizing toxicovigilance areas where interventions can have the highest impact on public health, ensuring that our efforts are targeted and evidence-informed. We'll also be working to align relevant stakeholders, partnerships, legislations, and policies so that this framework supports a cohesive pan-Canadian approach. Toxicovigilance Canada is committed to collaboration, and we invite partners and stakeholders to connect with us at the email address provided to learn more, share insights, and get involved in the next stages of the framework development. In closing the framework component part of the presentation, together we can strengthen Canada's capacity to detect, assess, and respond to toxic threats, including intentional exposures and events, protecting the health of people living in Canada from all jurisdictions.
Thank you very much, Julie. And we are going to move on now to hearing from two representatives of the Public Outreach and Communications Working Group of Toxicovigilance Canada. And we'll start with Stephanie Cowell, who is the Director of Knowledge Translation with Parachute, and who also is the co-chair of the Poison Outreach and Communications Working Group. Over to you, Steph, to start.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here to talk more about the Public Outreach and Communication Working Group of Toxicovigilance Canada. So when we think about outreach, education, and communication within the realm of poison prevention messaging, we can think about multiple goals and multiple points of intervention where communication becomes quite relevant. First, there's messaging that aims to impact the pre-exposure state, so primary prevention. This includes raising awareness of poison prevention strategies, educating the public on risk factors, particularly developmental risk factors when we're talking about children and youth who are vulnerable to poisoning, and providing evidence regarding toxicity of potential toxins. Then we also have messaging that can address the exposure state once someone has been exposed to a potential toxin. And this can include raising awareness of harm reduction, safe first aid practices, promoting familiarity and awareness of the toll-free number to reach poison center services, and reinforcing the important role of poison centers to provide assistance in these cases. And finally, once an exposure has occurred and that frontline aspect of care and harm reduction is met. There's also messaging related to what do we do with this information, particularly when we're seeing trends and things that are potentially harmful to the public. And so there may be messaging here that relates to advocacy around improved product regulation, awareness raising around new and emerging threats to the public. Decision makers and healthcare professionals are all aware of this. And so it's in relation to all these points of messaging and these goals that the Public Outreach and Communication Working Group's mandate sits. And the working group is dedicated to developing a consistent and coordinated pan-Canadian approach to poison center awareness and prevention messaging. It offers a forum for discussion, knowledge exchange, and collaboration across sectors. And our members are recognized as experts in their fields, and the working group leverages that expertise to ensure the dissemination of current and reliable information across Canada. And so when it comes to our membership, it's quite broad, and Richard talked about the growth of Toxicovigilance Canada overall, and the same can be said for this area of public outreach and communications. The group, what originally started largely with poison centers and government representation, and has grown to include more and more representation from different fields. And we now have 66 members across Canada in the working group. According to the terms of reference, the working group is co-chaired by one of Canada's poison centers and a non-poison center organization. So at this current time, the co-chairs are Chad Larrabee from Ontario Poison Center and myself representing Parachute. And our membership, as I said, is a wide variety of expertise and representation of various sectors. Because as Richard mentioned, and others have described, this is truly a collaborative effort and doesn't sit just in one place. There's the sense of a community of ownership and potential points of intervention. So in addition to having members from all of Canada's poison centers, from Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada, various departments and agencies within those agencies, we have provincial injury prevention centers, provincial territorial governments and agencies. That's an area we're looking to grow more membership in. So if there's any folks on the line interested in joining the group, we can perhaps put contact information in the chat of the webinar if you want to reach out. And then also national organizations, largely nonprofits. In addition to Parachute, this includes the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction, Institute for Safe Medication Practices Canada, and others. And I want to share specifically that the Injury Prevention Center at the School of Public Health at the University of Alberta and members from PADIS are active members and contributors. We also have active membership from the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. In terms of the core activities of the group, this includes year-round communications planning, again, using poison center data as well as other input to identify trends, whether those are seasonal or based on other factors. And through the data, poison center experience and other observations, we can kind of flag key points around the year and opportunities to communicate in a proactive sense. Collectively, we collect key messaging and resources, and what you'll see on the screen is an example of our annual communications calendar, which this is showing kind of a front summary of the seasonal trends and opportunities for communication, but links through to key shared messaging that everyone can simply use to get information out through those channels and to their audiences, whether those be health professionals, the public, parents, older adults, a wide variety of audience that our members reach. We also will develop ad hoc messaging and key messaging for incidents that may happen. One of the things that we've discovered has been really important for poison prevention is around storms and power outages. Poison centers have shared concerns about increases in carbon monoxide poisoning when there are power outages, to the various solutions people are using, maybe to cook or heat their homes, bringing barbecues or other devices into their homes. That's one example. And so for those sorts of situations, the group has collectively identified key messaging share in that case. Another activity that we help coordinate is an annual Poison Prevention Week. It's held each March, and coming up in 2026, it will take place from March 15th to March 21st. And as a pan-Canadian group, we coordinate themes, messaging, resources, and activity across the country. We develop a collaborative approach, and then local activities are driven by local partners. So, for example, leadership in the space would be under the Injury Prevention Center in Alberta, working in collaboration with PADIS and Alberta Health Services. So again, collaboration, but also opportunities for provincial and territorial and local partners to take the lead, to know their own context, to be leaders in that space and be more effective, but recognizing that when we do that collectively, it can have a broader impact. And the final activity I'll mention is, more broadly, having this diverse group allows opportunities for information sharing and dissemination support. So through various aspects of Toxicovigilance Canada's work, where, for example, public advisories are put out through Health Canada, this group is on hand to support, again, getting out to various audiences and channels, identifying concerns or trends on social media, but also using social media as a key way to get information out to different audiences. And this group can provide both proactive and responsive support. So again, identifying trends or engaging in this notion of see something, say something, and bringing concerns forward to the group. That, again, because of that connection to Toxicovigilance Canada, doesn't just stay in the silo of this group. The presence of, for example, regulatory bodies at the table can identify when something maybe should be moved into further action, but it could be raised at this table. Similarly, issues and concerns and activities identified in other components of Toxicovigilance Canada can come through this group for additional responsive support. So a truly kind of bi-directional opportunity to just leverage as much as we can the expertise and opportunities we have around the table. So that's a broad overview of the working group. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Patty Stark, and she is going to speak more specifically to the Alberta context and work that's done. So Sarah, if you want to do the honors.
Thank you so much, Steph. So I'd just like to introduce Patty before I hand it off, Patty, to you. So Patty Stark is the Community Mobilization Coordinator at the Injury Prevention Center of the Public School of Health at the University of Alberta. And Patty is a member of the Public Outreach and Communications Working Group. Over to you, Patty.
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to say thank you to everybody for allowing us the opportunity to share a bit about the poison prevention work that we do at the Injury Prevention Center. As Stephanie and Sarah have already noted, we're located in the School of Public Health at the University of Alberta, and we've actually been in operation over 25 years. There are only 8 of us on staff, so we do a lot of our work collaboratively with partners across Alberta. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have been involved in poison prevention since about 2010. We started looking at it when we saw in our injury data an increase in the number of unintentional poisonings that was happening in the province. So we pulled together a number of interested partners from across the province to have a conversation about what was happening with regards to poison prevention. And one of the things that came out of the conversation was a need for a coordinated effort. So in partnership with many of our partners across the province, we designed our first promotional campaign for Poison Prevention Week in March of 2016. And what we did was printed prescription bags with medication safety messages on it that focused on safe storage and handling. And the hope was that the pharmacies would put the prescriptions that they fill in the bags and share them with their customers. And either that would initiate a conversation between the pharmacist and the customer, or when the customer took that medication home, they'd see these messages about safe storage and think a little bit about where they were storing their medications. Next slide. So over the years, our focus has changed during Poison Prevention Week. And I've just noted below some of the topic areas. In March 2020, because we had just had legislation that allowed legalized cannabis edibles, our community partners felt it was really important for us to get information out to parents about the safe handling and storage of cannabis and the concerns we had if it was consumed by children in those cannabis-containing goodies that look so much like the regular sweets and treats they're used to. And then, as Brooke already noted, in 2021, based on the data from PADIS, about the increase they were seeing in calls due to exposures from hand sanitizers, disinfectants, and cleaners, we focused our campaign messages on the safe use of these products. Next slide. So PADIS has always been extremely important to us in terms of helping us inform and decide on the direction of our poison prevention messaging. The other aspect we really appreciate that the staff at PADIS is able to share is some generalized circumstances about what happens that leads to calls that they receive. So we can build narratives that we can share with people in community, because by building those narratives, people can see the issue as being relatable, and that it could be a scenario that they find themselves in at some time when they're going through their daily activities. Next slide. So as I said, there's only 8 of us on staff, so we rely very much on our community partners to share the information when we are talking about poison prevention. So what we do every year is create a toolkit that contains images, posters, social media, activities, all sorts of things to support their work so they can go out and talk about poison prevention. In particular, one of the most important pieces that we have been able to provide is a giveaway, a tangible promotional item. Most of our partners say that there's kind of an exchange that goes on when they interact with their community members. And if they have something to give a community member, the community member is then more compelled to start a conversation or engage and talk about why they're out there and what they're doing and what are they trying to get across. So that's been really key. And fortunately, we've had a little bit of funding every year that allows us to find some kind of tangible item. Giveaways have included things like cupboard locks, lock boxes. When we were doing the cannabis campaign, we were talking about, well, what do people who are consuming cannabis do? And it's like, well, they get the munchies. So we developed this cheeky little chip clip with a cannabis poisoning message on it that we provided that year. In the last couple of years, we've been focusing on medication poisoning prevention for young children. So what we are providing in the last few days or the last few years is a dispensing syringe and some medicine cups for dispensing medication. Next slide. As I already alluded to, we are a very small organization, so we work really hard to develop partnerships with others that have an interest in poisoning prevention. PADIS is always a key partner. When we were doing our promotion of cannabis and safe storage, unfortunately, this happened March 2020. So we were just getting ready to launch everything and go out to a retailer who'd agreed to sponsor and provide information in their stores, and we were shut down. However, the retailer, who had 23 stores across the province at that time, was happy to play a video on their TV screens that they had within their stores. And they also had messaging right at the point of sale so that people coming out to pay for their items would see that messaging. We've worked with daycares and our family day homes. We've been asked to help develop tools or activities that the family day homes can use with their children And so we do that during Poison Prevention Week. And a more recent partnership that we have is with the some of the staff at the Faculty of Pharmacy. They've been helpful in terms of providing expertise for developing some of our resources, like giving medication safely, and also providing some guidance about how we may better improve our connections to community pharmacists in Alberta. And right now, the other thing that's happening is the pharmacy students have an outreach program or class where they have to work with a community partner or engage with community to develop something related to pharmacy. And I have 3 groups that are currently doing some projects for us, focusing on developing resources and activities for young children and their parents. So one of the groups has developed a comic strip and a lesson plan for teachers so that they can deliver some key medication safety messages for kids in younger elementary school. I have a group that has developed a banner poster that somehow, and I'm not quite sure how this works yet, but I'll find out, where it fits on the shelf where medication is available for people to purchase over the counter. So where the acetaminophen and the ibuprofen is, and it talks about the concerns we have with poisonings associated with these medications and provides some key ways to prevent that from happening. It suggests talking to the pharmacist at the location if they have more questions, and there's also a QR code they can go to. And the third group has developed a little song that the kids can learn in the early elementary grades that provides, again, some messaging around things they should be thinking about when they see medication. Next slide, please. So because our funder requests it, we're always looking at ways that we can evaluate our activities and our programs. So evaluation is an important part of our poison prevention campaign as well. It's not a problem for us to connect with our community partners to get feedback. However, we have been challenged in the last number of years about how to get some feedback from the parents or caregivers who we are trying to get messages to. And that's because we're not the person who shares the message. We have an intermediary that shares the message. So what we have done, or what we did last year, was we actually, when we were creating our little medicine dispensing kits, we placed a sticker on there asking parents, or inviting parents to go and fill out a survey, and then they were entered into a draw for a gift card. So that worked quite well for us. And that's where we're starting to get a little bit of feedback about some of the work we're doing directly from the audience. We're trying to get the behavior change in. And that's it for me. If you want to just skip the next slide, because I understand we're doing questions at the end. Sarah, the last slide is just my contact information and the website for the Injury Prevention Center.
Thank you very much, first of all, Parachute, for helping us to put all of this together. Thank you very much for taking care of the logistics. Thank you also to my team who supported the organization, and Alberta to host us, give us this room, and also show us their interest for discussing about toxicovigilance, poison centers, all of this. So very happy with this, and also definitely we are going to continue to work with you and approach you, because I'm really interested in having other meetings like this, or activities, or workshops, or topics, or different type of events that we could have with Alberta and Saskatchewan and territories to continue this relationship, because it's something that I'm going to give you 2 examples where I really noticed how the added value of this collaboration. So first of all, I have to disclose that I'm from the Radiation Protection Bureau. So my expertise is really in
And we don't hold that against them.
It's really in nuclear emergency preparedness. But it looks like my organization detected that I was good enough for being posted during the opioid crisis in 2017 in the Health Emergency Operations Center for supporting the operations as being responsible for the chief of operations. Anyway, they posted me there, and I learned a lot. It was the first time I was really exposed with the opioid the exposure of the population, Canadians, to a substance where people were dying, and it's still the case, but there was really a big wave. And I can say how important it was for the Ontario, Quebec, all the other provinces to benefit from what BC was experiencing for their lab analysis, for prevention, for really, I really have the feeling that the linkages that I generated, that I supported, that I coordinated during this crisis between the provinces helped to save Canadians. I'm sure of that, no doubt about it. And when, well, 7 years after, so when they proposed me to work with Richard, Julie, and Mark, I said yes right away because I knew that what they were doing was very useful. So networking is definitely important, and feds or not, there's added value between the provinces to talk to each other for sure. Okay, is it us who can help to facilitate this? Probably. It's possible also for the provinces to communicate directly, but I think that if we want to have a kind of coordination and make sure that that you can really benefit the maximum from your expertise, your experiences, so your knowledge. So that definitely I want my division to be this kind of piece of the puzzle that can help us to establish this network. So it was a very good experience. The second one that I experienced, it's what happened with Anjanon First Nation, so in Sarnia. So as you know, they were exposed to a level of benzene that were not deemed appropriate. Well, certainly not. And just before this crisis, okay, we had this workshop with the Ontario that was about, collaboration between Poison Center and Public Safety. And I can tell you that because we knew already each other, it was so easy to put, to mobilize the network, start the discussions, coordinate and support the province for addressing the issue that they were dealing with regarding benzene. So for me, it was another experience where I said, oh, okay, so definitely finding any pretext, any reasons for working with the provinces and establish and have the chance also to meet you in person, and even for the people remotely, but that it's fundamental. It is fundamental. So I strongly believe in this. So this is why don't be surprised if we continue to approach you and try to organize something, with your province. Because we want to remain connected, and we want to make sure that if there are a way that we can help support, well, we will for sure. Trust me. So and just to let you know that before I worked for the Radiation Protection Bureau, I worked for the province of Quebec at the Ministry of Environment. So I was a civil servant working for 13 years in the province. So I have a good understanding of what a province has to deal with. And in that sense, I think that sometimes when I look Quebec, I look Alberta, I can see some similarities. So it's very very interesting, and you can count on me that if we are supporting, it's going to be done respectfully and with a very good intent. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Claude. One final pardon the clumsiness of this. One final thank you for everyone online today for joining us. And one final reminder, please do complete the evaluation on your way out today. It really is important and valued feedback for us. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day today.